everyone. Welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. Everyone knows on the MHP Show, we talk about anything and everything that has to do with mobile home parks, operations, crazy stories, all the crazy stuff that happens. And so that's what we talk about on the MHP Show. Excuse me. Before we get started, I actually wanted to make a little shout for my new ebook. It's if you go to free.parkinvestingpro.com, it's basically how I built my portfolio and how I structured those deals and how I did my first couple deals with no money and how I structured those deals so it was advantageous for me and the investors, and the how to get the freaking money part that actually shows you how to do that, because I didn't know how to do that in the beginning. And knowing what I know now, had I known that in the beginning, I would have grown a lot faster. So check that out at free.parkinvestingpro.com. So now my guest today is, sort of near and dear to my heart, because I think she's stopped like the gray from coming in here, as fast as it was coming in. I will say that. So I have Tracy Renna on the show today. Did I say that right? I said it right, didn't I?
You did. Yes, okay. You did. You got it.
Okay. And so Tracy is with MH Title Brokers, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And so Tracy specializes in title work. So Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just to tell you a little bit about Tracy is that I basically handed her a big pile of shit, for a lack of a better term. And Tracy has helped us navigate this insanely complicated title process. And so if you could just explain a little bit about what your company does, how long you've been doing it, and just a little bit about your background.
Sure. So my background, I started working with titles. My husband has been in the pre-owned manufacturing business for a while. And part of it was having to transfer titles correctly. So when I was in the healthcare field for over 15 years. And so at night, that's what I would do. I would help him with title work, make sure everything was done correctly. And then over time, titles got worse. And then right around COVID, I stopped working in the healthcare field and I kind of worked with him full time. Well, it sort of just grew. People were finding me. They were, from not only park owners to title companies to actually transportation companies and other brokers. And so I learned a lot. I have been doing this a long time, but seriously for the last 3 years. And then Derek, you and I met. And then that really, that put me on hyper speed with how many challenges a park can possibly have with titles.
Yes.
Because every park was different. Everyone was different.
Yes. And everyone listening, you all know that I, talk about, buying parks with park-owned homes and like converting them. And so make sure you have the titles, because it's just so much brain damage. Or make sure you have Tracy on your team so she can kind of help you navigate through this, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I'm like, it's just easy to get a title. I can get a title. It's not going to take that long. It's not going to be that much of a process. And, I learned rather quickly that was just not the case. And so how did I actually meet you? I don't remember. I may have found you. I don't know. Somebody maybe recommended, or I forget how that happened.
I don't know. I don't really know. I think you said you got it in an email, and that may have been the time where I was just starting to send out feelers like, hey, if you have any problems with your mobile home titles, I can help you. And the first one really was you had a park where one of the owners retired half the titles to the land. And that was interesting to me, because I never really had a park, do that. It's usually, we don't know where they're at. So I had to start reinstating the titles. And then from there, it was, we're missing titles. How do we figure that part out? HUD plates and, manufacturer data reports and and the whole kit and caboodle. I mean, yeah. And then the biggest piece was that I was really frustrated with is that I can't get abandoned titles. I mean, I could try, but that's really for a lawyer, especially in the state of Florida. Other states are different. But in Florida, you have to do a declaration, like a complaint, and be able to get a judgment. So that's where there was a certain wall that we hit, and it took me a bit to be able to find somebody that I thought was, you know what I mean, could help you the next step.
And that just goes to show you, if we talk, if Tracy learned new stuff working with our title issues, like, that just goes to show you the issue that we had that we didn't necessarily know that we had in the beginning. And, it's something, I think a lot of operators just miss this. You're like, all titles, I'm worried about the septic and the treatment plant and stuff. But like, I got to tell you guys, like, so in the beginning, we didn't really know. And when any deal that we purchased, if they didn't have a title, we would typically have the seller credit, $1,000 or $2,000 at closing. But now that I've been doing this, between the brain damage, the employee hours, my time, everybody else's time, you need like $5,000. I mean, and if it's abandoned and you have to get an attorney, I mean, it might even be more than that.
I know. Like, it's true. It is. I helped. I don't know how this title company found me out of Fort Myers, but they were closing on a park down there. And one of the things that they were adamant about, and I don't know if it was the buyer's attorney, but they wanted titles. They wanted to see them. They wanted to know you had them. I mean, so that's where I had to do all the way legwork in the beginning before even closing. And they moved that closing. They didn't care. They're like, we'll move it, we'll wait. But by the end, we were able to sort through, and they were meticulous. But that's where I'm like, I wish more closing agents would be that diligent about, hey, listen, there should be titles here, to these mobile homes. Where are they? Are they retired? Or are they missing? Whose name are they in? So yeah, that's the one thing I found out. I thought would be the best practice is to kind of figure it out from the beginning before you actually close. But I know everybody does things differently. So, that is, I've done a couple like that, and that seemed to work out quite well.
Yeah. Yeah. And to Tracy's point there, like, you need to be that meticulous on the titles. Like you do, because, I took the seller's word for it. Oh yeah, we got titles. And then, you get a box. Yeah. You get a cardboard box at closing, or you go to wherever and get it. And then you're like, oh my God, like, this is a mess. None of them are in the right name and whatever. So it causes so many problems. But Tracy, tell us why this is so important. Like, why does someone, if they're buying their first park and they have park-owned homes, like, why is it so important? And like, what problems can this cause?
Well, I'm starting to see a trend now with community owners that a lot of them just want the land, and they no longer want to have park-owned homes. So now they're trying to go back through the titles and say, okay, let me sell these homes to whoever, the tenant that's in there or a new prospective tenant. And so you want to make sure you have the right title to the correct house. And, I call it the 3-point check. There's hopefully a HUD plate on the outside of the home on the width side. That's this metal plate that's about 3 inches by 5 inches. And then they'll have letters and then some numbers afterwards. And then, or a manufacturer data report in the house. And that should have a serial number. And then that serial number, 98% of the time, is your VIN number on the title. So that's kind of your 3-point check. And now some parks, like they may have homes in there, from before 1987. I think that's when HUD really started putting those plates on the houses. HUD stands for housing. oh my gosh, housing of, oh my God, I can't believe I'm missing it. It'll come to me. It does stand for something, but anyhow, they have a third party person that actually will stamp that on the side of the house at the manufacturing plant. So it's not the person who is manufacturing the home that puts that there. There are engineers that come along and say, yes, this is structurally sound. This is built to specs. But before 78, they had no HUD plates. There were no sort of parameters for these houses. So when you start getting into those old ages, you may not have titles. It's hard to really recreate them because you don't have any other piece of information to pull from to be able to, you know what I mean, obtain a title. And then that's when we're going into recreating titles, abandoned titles. But I find it important for a couple of reasons. One, if you are choosing to go the road where you no longer want to have those park-owned homes in your park's name and you want to sell them, make sure you have the correct title to the house. The second part is I have actually been seeing some park owners reach out to me, and if they want to refinance, some of the banks are asking for these titles and will not refinance unless they have all the titles to the homes of the park. So I don't know which, I know every lender is different, but those are the two main things I was seeing. And that's why I usually have people contact me where they're in a tiz and they're like, everything's depending on this one final title because the lender won't refinance the park. So that's what I've been seeing.
Yeah, and then you have to relay the bad news. Oh, there's no HUD plate? Oh, there's no manufacturer data report? Oh, it's a 1970s home. We ain't getting this title anytime soon. There's no sticker in the window?
That's right.
Is there a sticker in the window?
No, our piece, yes. Something that we can, be able to hunt down and investigate. But yes, yeah, I agree. So
yeah, and I think when you're
development,
yes, that's it.
I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, thank you. My brain was frozen there for a moment. Okay.
Yeah, and I think it was 1976, I believe, when that sort of came into being. And any house before that, it just gets a little shaky when it comes to the titling process. And I'll say, if you're buying a park and you're going through due diligence and you're inspecting the park-owned homes, okay, so maybe the owners remodeled them. That's great. But, is there any identification of this home? Right? Because this is some of the trouble we had. The houses were remodeled. And so anything that even gave some sort of identification to the home was gone. The tongue was cut off. The beam under the trailer is you're not going to find it. Right? It's impossible. And so you need to inspect for that and decide if, you're going to keep those park-owned homes. It's probably closer to being okay if you're going to keep them park-owned homes. I mean, you still want the titles eventually. But if you're trying to sell them, you need to have the titles. There's no question. And people are going to ask for that. And it creates more problems. And so I haven't heard many people online really talk about this, but I'm telling you, it's important. And no one finds out about it until they buy a park and they're like, damn, this title process sucks.
It does. It does. And it really got it. This the abandoned title process got the laws changed in Florida in around 2021. And that's when they said, hey, listen, you got to go to court and get a judgment. Before that, it was a lot easier in the state of Florida. You can kind of say, hey, it's, less than $500, nobody's there. So the laws were a lot more lenient, but it definitely changed since I think 2021. And that's where now you have to go to court.
Yeah. And I feel like someone told me recently that they even, I don't know, I think they made it even harder in Florida some way.
Oh, it's yeah. I mean, even to do, let's say you, the other part that I'm seeing, well, let's talk with abandoned titles. It's one where you either have to go to court because you have to file the declaration complaint to be able to get the judgment. Okay. But then there's also the other piece where you have a home in your park, you had a tenant in it, the tenant had title, and then they just left. All right. So now that's another avenue, and that is under the umbrella of the Landlord Tenant Act. And you have to file an eviction even if they're no longer there. So what I'm seeing is I have a lot of park owners use an attorney to file the eviction, but then anything after that, they will come to me. So I'm filing, I'm making sure all the documents that are there. I'm putting the notice in the paper. We're doing the sale. We're kind of going down the list. But let me tell you something. It's like an 18-point list. It's like it's not easy. You have to make sure everything is there or they will not give you title at the end. That's even tough. It's tough. The requirements are very different, and that changed as well. I don't think it was that way. I have to go back through the laws, but I know they never wanted a writ of possession. Never. It's different now. So I think you're right.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And so what would be like if a park owner said like, hey, Tracy, I'm buying this 50 lot park. There's 20 or 30 park owned homes. Like, hey, can you help me? Or at least give me a list of best practices that you would look for. Like, what do you like? Give me a best practice that a park owner can adopt, even if they go buy their first park, like to make sure they don't run into this, this gray hair causing machine here.
Yeah. I would highly suggest that have the buyer furnish the titles, copies of titles, and say, can I see them? And can you tell me what lot numbers they match up to? And then I would go and see if they have HUD plates on them, and then, this goes to this lot number, and if there isn't a HUD plate, you're going to have to take his word for it that title goes to that house.
Right.
And there's another way but there's another avenue you can take. There is a company called IBTS, and what they do is they will do HUD verification letters. I'm telling you some secrets here. So, and you can go about being able to figure out the HUD label from a lot of times the title. Again, this is a lot of investigation. It's a trial and error, but there are avenues to be able to figure out, does this title, you know what I mean? You can get a HUD verification letter and hopefully everything matches up. It should, from the information you give them from the title. That's another way you have two documentations to say, hey, this goes to this house. But it's hard. Right. I mean, because you still don't know, does that title actually really go to that house? I mean, it's truly a guess sometimes if you can't find the numbers on the frame of the house, if it's not on the tongue, if the RP stickers in the window, let's say they RP it, and then you're running that number and it doesn't match up with the serial number, you know what I mean, or the VIN on the title. So you would hope that the owner, the seller is giving you good information, giving you correct information with the titles that they have and saying that they go to the homes. But I would always double check everything. And a lot of time, that's where I would start.
Yeah. And, don't make Derek's mistake and be like, oh, yeah, the owner told me he had all the titles.
Oh, yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do that. So hypothetical situation here, Tracy. Let's say I'm buying a mobile home park that it's a great deal. I want it bad. Right. And there's, 30 park owned homes and the seller's just like, dude, I don't have the titles. Like, what would be obviously not an ideal situation, but it's a great deal, like whatever. Like, what would be those next steps? Because I know someone's going to run into this. They're going to be like, Derek, I found a deal, but they don't have titles. And I heard your show with Tracy, like, oh my God, don't do it. But is there any, like, what else could be okay? It might be okay if you can find numbers on the homes or what? Yeah. So what's your
Well,
answer to that?
I mean, I go back to HUD plates. Is there HUD plates? It's on the width side of the home. It's a metal plate. Is there anything in the house, which is called usually in the house? It's called a manufacturer data report, and it's either found under on the cabinet doors under the sink, or it's in the master bedroom closet, or possibly the electrical box. So I guess there's three places for it. And then, is there anything there? Is there any, did they RP it? And what does that mean? That means that they got, instead of the little yellow stickers are like registration stickers for your car. So when you have a mobile home in the state of Florida, if you just want to pay for it every year, you'll get a sticker and you're supposed to stick it on your window of your mobile home. Now, if it's a park owned home, on park owned land, you, the owner of the land, can make it real property. All right. And then you will have a number attached to it. And that will go back to the title of the home. So you might be able to find it that way. Now, if you can't find anything you're right, Derek. I mean, you're looking at hiring an attorney that's going to cost about, $2,000 to $5,000 with all this process of trying to per home, if you should ever decide that you now want to sell them or get them off your property, because some mobile home park owners, they want to put new homes in. Sometimes they just can't keep continuing to rehab it. I mean, there's nothing more to rehab for a house. So they're going to start bringing in newer homes. Well, what do you want to do with the older homes? Well, then you got to get them demolished. Or you may have some people that may take them, but they want to take them for title. But if you demo them, that's another fee. You know what I mean? To somebody to come and quote you and either tear it down or take it to the dump. So, yeah, I mean, either way, it's a challenge, but I agree with you. I think you almost want to be like, oh, you don't have the titles? Well, let's start talking about knocking it off the price, because this is going to cost me a lot of money to be able to get titles to this home.
Yeah, money and time for sure.
Yeah.
And so how long does that take, Tracy, typically, if there's nothing? No, you can't find anything. How long does that take typically?
Oh, well, it seems like I'm trying to figure out what the attorney said. I think he said it can take up to 4 months. I think it's 3 to 4 months to be able to get title. Now, if you have your own attorney that you want to work with, that's fine. I know that there are some large firms in Florida, but I also know they're very behind. I mean, some people are saying it's taking 8 months to get title, or even over a year to be able to get title. So now if you're like, hey, I don't want to have these park owned homes, I think I just want to sell them to everyone. Well, you really can't, because now you got to wait a year before you even do it.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like there's a lot that goes into that. And what we found in ours is that it's taken like 12 months and even up to 18 months on some, because you have to, once you file the thing with the court, you have to wait 30 days and then they get 40 days to respond. And then, it just keeps getting crazy and you got to send a letter to somebody and then they get 30 days to respond. And so before you know it, here you are a year. And it's and the only reason I say that is like, yeah, of course you can go in and just buy whatever you want. Don't care about the titles. Like, it's fine. Like, but I'm just saying, like,
I also think, oh, I'm sorry. No, I also think as investors, you kind of you'll shift. You'll be like, hey, listen, I'm realizing, I don't want to do this anymore. Or you may shift and be like, hey, I want to refinance and I want to put some new homes in here. Doing that, now you got to get rid of the old homes, and you can't sell them now because you don't have title. I mean, there will be buyers for it, even the older homes, as long as it's a wind zone 2. If it's a wind zone 1, you can't really reinstall it in the state of Florida. A lot of times people will have to take them up to Georgia, because you can install wind zone 1s up there. But, then now you have to pay for demoing, because you have something that's, has value, but unfortunately you don't have title to get the value from it.
Right. Explain to our listeners what the wind zone thing is.
Sure. In Florida, you will find it on there. Remember that sticker I was talking about, the manufacturer data report? That's either found under the kitchen cabinet, under the sink, or in the master bedroom, or at the electrical box. So this tells you a lot. This will tell you what HUD plate number. That's why on this, if the HUD plate number doesn't match what's sitting on the outside of the home, then you had somebody kind of, doing fraudulent stuff, changing things around. But they will tell you the HUD plate number that should be on the home. It will tell you the serial number, which should be found on your titles. And then with the wind zone itself, it will tell you whether it's a wind zone 1 or wind zone 2 or possibly a wind zone 3. You don't see a lot of those in Central Florida. You'll mainly see wind zone 3s down in the Keys, Fort Myers area, anything along the ocean, because of the possible hurricane winds coming through. So the wind zone 3s are built differently. They're built stronger. They're very solid. They're beautiful, beautiful homes. And just the way they're built, because they remind me of like a brick and mortar home, really. There's just some newer ones. So wind zone 2, you can if you wanted to move it off of what, let's say one of the park owners, like, listen, I want to sell a couple of these homes. And hopefully they know they're wind zone 2. Anybody buying them is going to want to ask, they'll probably ask the owner, hey, are these wind zone 2? And that's another thing that you're going to have to get that information for people. And, but you can reinstall them in the state of Florida. It is legal. If you're selling a home and you find out that it's a wind zone 1, you cannot reinstall them in the state of Florida. Many of them go to Georgia, or a lot of times they get destroyed. It's just that they don't feel as though that the wind load that's hitting the home is strong enough to withstand, hurricane winds, or just whatever the wind load is for a wind zone 2. I don't know what it is. I'll have to look at how many miles an hour it is, but that's really what it stands for.
Yeah, interesting.
And if you want to buy as a park owner, and you want to put some pre-owned homes in your home, in your park, because some do that. Some do it, and then when they do it, they also realize the cost to it, because that's not cheap either when you're buying a pre-owned home. But that is the one thing, if you choose to go that route, make sure that it is a wind zone 2.
Okay. I was just curious, this just came to mind, you may or may not know, like in tornado, areas where tornadoes happen, does the same wind zone thing apply? Or is it in the Midwest, it's just, you can have a wind zone 1 home and it doesn't matter?
I don't know about tornadoes. I just know it's when they're manufactured in the factory, that's the way they're built will withstand, a certain wind push. So I'm not quite sure about tornadoes.
Maybe they're just like, tornadoes, doesn't matter. It's going to be toast anyway. So like, what's the difference?
These site-built homes can't even withstand tornadoes.
Yeah, I know. Good point. And so, like, you may or may not know, but like, as far as other states go, Georgia, Carolinas, kind of, is their title process similar to Florida's, or is it vary a little bit by state?
In South Carolina, because I'm working up there with a park owner. Now, when people from out of state contact me, they're really contacting me to get missing titles. So I do a lot of, abandoned title work in at least South Carolina. And I'm also looking at Illinois and Ohio. I had a park owner reach out to me. So I'm starting to do that. But I can't speak about South Carolina. What I do know is, if you buy, like in Florida, if you buy a home, you still have to, it's used, all right? And you're reselling it. You still have to pay sales tax on it. In South Carolina, it's not that way. You basically pay one sales tax of when it was bought new, and that is it. So if you resell it, that person doesn't have to pay sales tax. There is no registration. However, they do a decal they call it a decal number. And most of these mobile homes have decal numbers. So, and then the abandoned title process is a little bit simpler in South Carolina versus Florida. So you don't have to go to court. There are different ways. If you have a VIN number, you've got to go one route. If you have no VIN number and nothing, you've got to go in a different path. But each one do not lead you to court like in Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I know it's a little bit different in each state, but like, that's why you bring someone on like Tracy in order to kind of navigate these waters for you. Because if you're an entrepreneur, you're a park owner, like you don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Like it's not in your blood. Right. So Tracy, you can give away all the secrets on here all you want, but I guarantee you, no one on here is going to use them. They're going to be like, I'm just going to call Tracy. Like this sounds too complicated. Right. And I know that to be the case because, yeah, it's just.
You've handed me titles, and then Jason handed me titles, and then titles went back to Jason.
Yes. Talia just called me a second ago, and I was like, I know we've all had lots of conversations between our office and having everyone talking to you because we had crazy title issues. But anything else that you want to say before we close out here, Tracy? Like anything that people need to know or look out for, or how can people contact you?
I don't think so. If something comes up, and I usually have some unique calls every once in a while, but most of them are, hey, how do I get title? I don't have title. It always starts off with a missing title. If there's some numbers on that box, that mobile home, we can usually figure out what the VIN number is and who might own it. And then Derek, that's the other piece. Sometimes, even if you contact the person, you're like, hey, can you please help me? You know what I mean? Your name is still on this title, and you almost open up a can of worms too.
They're going to be like, I'll help you. We had to send a guy like, I don't know, $500, $1,000, a month ago or something. I'm like, whatever, dude. Like, and see, that's the other thing. So I think it's more than $5,000 in credit on the contract because you don't know if the title's in this position. And Johnny over here may demand $2,000 for him to release it. Yeah. And it might even have a lien on it. Right?
I know, because they never paid the registration for 5 years. I know. Mm-hmm. So yes, I can. We can problem solve. You can always contact me at 813-705-7044, or my direct email is info@mhtitlebrokers.com. But I don't know. I can't say I've heard it all. Let's just put it that way. I can't say that because something always seems to creep up.
Your heard it all sphere, or your the breadth of that definitely widened after you worked with us. So
yes, Derek, I
we're actually nearing the end of the fiasco. Like, so I was able to call Datha the other day because we were looking for something, and I was like, where's the me and one of the property managers, and we're like, where's the title to X house? And she's like, oh, right here. We got the number, we got everything. It's like, I'm like, man, I told her, I was like, Datha, you've done a great job on this, because had you had not, like a year ago, this was just utter chaos. So anyways, we appreciate. Go ahead.
No, you worked very hard to sort things out. And I commend you for that. I really do. I commend you, your staff, everybody, because you you didn't realize it. And then you're like, oh my goodness, we have to make this right. And that's what you're doing. You're making it right. So, for whether or not you're going to sell it or whatever you're doing with it, at least you're like, okay, I've got title to this. Yeah. Yeah. So I know. Yeah. So I commend you for it, because it really was a huge undertaking.
It definitely was. It definitely was.
Yeah.
Are you on social media? Any social media that you want to give anybody?
I'm on LinkedIn under MH Title Brokers and Facebook.
Okay.
Just a little bit on Facebook, yeah.
Yeah. So, you can find Tracy, give her a call, shoot her an email. She'd love to help you. And one thing I'll say before we wrap up here with Tracy is that, I like dealing with people on this stuff. If I got a problem, I can call them and they'll pick up the phone. Like, unlike other title people that I've worked with, I won't mention any names. Tracy picks up the freaking phone. Like, and she communicates. If not, she's like, hey, I'm in something. I'll call you back, and she'll text me. And so that's super, super important when you're, looking for somebody to deal with this stuff. And anyways, so give Tracy a shout if you're having title issues. She'll help you go through the process. And so thank you, Tracy, for coming on to the MHP Show. Guys, just like and subscribe. We're on iTunes, Spotify. I always forget. I mean, we're everywhere. We're on all the platforms. I'm on all the platforms, social media platforms. Leave a comment, like or dislike. Just give me something, man. Give me something. So we will see you guys next week. Peace.